It's late at night in a small Detroit home. A young boy sits hunched over a notepad, scribbling rhymes by the glow of a street lamp. Each line is an escape, a spell against the chaos around him. He doesn't know it yet, but these frantic verses will one day echo across the world. Hello friends, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're peeling back the fame and persona to explore the true story of Marshall Mathers, better known as Eminem, and the emotional journey that forged one of hip-hop's legends. It's a story of trauma and fury, of love and mistakes, of hitting rock bottom and clawing back to life, and through it all, it's a story of resilience in the face of pain. Marshall Bruce Mathers III came into the world under difficult circumstances. His mother, Debbie Nelson, was just 18 years old when she had him, and his father abandoned the family immediately after Marshall's birth. With his dad gone, Marshall grew up with no father figure at all. In fact, he later said he never even saw a picture of his father, who made no effort to contact him as a child. This absence left a wound that would ache for decades, as young Marshall silently vowed never to repeat the same mistake with his own children one day. Marshall's childhood was defined by instability and hardship. He and his mother lived in deep poverty, bouncing between low-rent homes and relatives' houses, rarely staying in one place long enough for Marshall to feel settled. By the time he was a pre-teen, they had moved dozens of times between Missouri and the gritty east side of Detroit. Being perpetually the new kid made Marshall an easy target. He was small, shy, and sensitive, a lonely outsider who found it hard to make friends amid constant relocations. And school wasn't a refuge. It was a war zone. Bullying became Marshall's daily reality. Classmates tormented him for being the scrawny new boy, and one particularly cruel bully named D'Angelo Bailey turned Marshall's life into a nightmare. The abuse wasn't just verbal, it was brutally physical. At age 9, just before his 9th birthday, Marshall was beaten so badly he fell into a coma for over a week. In one incident, Bailey smashed him in the face with a heavy snowball, breaking his nose. In another, he ambushed Marshall in a school bathroom, slamming his head into a urinal and knocking him unconscious. Marshall suffered a concussion and temporary vision loss in one eye from the attack. His mother, Debbie, was horrified. She even sued the Detroit school system for failing to protect her son, but the lawsuit was dismissed on a technicality. The trauma, however, would not be dismissed so easily. Marshall switched schools, but the damage was done. He had learned at a young age what it felt like to be helpless and full of rage. How did Marshall cope with this pain? He found solace in storytelling and rhyme. Writing little raps and sketching lyrics became his escape from reality. "I was beat up in the bathrooms and hallways for being the new kid," he later recalled. "What got me through this phase of my life was rapping. I found something. I started to feel like I was getting a little respect." Hip-hop became his armor. With a pen and a rhyme, the once powerless kid felt like a fighter rising from the mat. In the rough corridors of his childhood, Marshall discovered that words could be weapons and also wounds salve. Each verse he scribbled was a tiny act of defiance against a world that had hurt him. In the years to come, those verses would evolve into the alter ego Slim Shady, a wickedly comic, angry persona that said all the things Marshall felt he couldn't. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, we have to talk about the complicated woman at the center of Marshall's early life, his mother. Debbie Mathers looms large in Eminem's music as a ghost of his painful youth. In reality, their relationship was as toxic and tumultuous as the songs suggest. Debbie was a single mum under immense stress, barely more than a child herself when Marshall was born, and she struggled with her own mental health and substance abuse issues, according to Marshall's account. Marshall felt that she was neglectful and unstable. He has claimed in lyrics that his mother abused prescription drugs, and even that she once added Valium, a tranquilizer, to his food to keep him quiet. In one song, he angrily accused Debbie of having Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver invents or induces illness in someone under their care. These are horrendous allegations. Essentially, Marshall believed his mother made him sick on purpose for attention. Debbie vehemently denied this. In her 2008 memoir, she admitted to some mistakes, but insisted she did her best and that Marshall's portrayal of her as, in her words, a pill-popping alcoholic on welfare was largely exaggerated. It's difficult to untangle truth from emotion here. What's clear is that mother and son had a deeply fractured bond, scarred by poverty, stress, and mutual resentment. As Marshall grew into his late teens, the tension with Debbie escalated. He dropped out of high school at 17 and worked menial jobs to help with bills, all while honing his rap skills on the side. When his music finally started gaining traction in the late 90s, Marshall, now performing as Eminem, didn't shy away from airing family dirty laundry on the mic. On his breakthrough 1999 song My Name Is, he sarcastically quipped that his mum did more dope than he did. That very public jab was humiliating for Debbie. She responded by taking an extraordinary step, suing her own son for defamation. In 1999, Debbie Mathers filed a $10 million lawsuit over Eminem's lyrics about her. Marshall, only 26 and newly famous, was now being dragged to court by his mum. He said it was painful to be sued by his mother, but he stood by his songs as the truth. The case ended with Debbie being awarded a token settlement of around $25,000 in 2001, most of which went to her lawyer. Legally, it was a blip, but emotionally, it was a point of no return. Mother and son became public adversaries, their private feud immortalized in multi-platinum songs. Eminem's 2002 track, Cleaning Out My Closet, was like an open letter of fury to Debbie. In it, he unloaded years of bitterness, apologizing to his own daughter for the grandmother she'd never meet, and spitting, "My mum suffered from Munchausen syndrome," the very direct accusation that she made him ill intentionally. He also snarled that he hoped Debbie burns in hell in that song, capturing just how deep his anger ran. Debbie, for her part, maintained that Marshall's portrayal was a mix of outright lies and gross exaggerations, essentially artistic fiction. She even released a counter-disc track of her own at one point, an odd footnote in their saga. By this time, their relationship was essentially non-existent, except through lawyers and lyrics. And yet, even a pain this profound can evolve. As Eminem got older, especially after becoming a parent himself, something began to shift. The white-hot rage cooled to a simmer, perspective trickled in. In 2013, Eminem released Headlights, a song that shocked many fans, because it was an apology. In Headlights, he speaks to his mother with regret and sorrow, rapping, "I'm sorry, Mama, for cleaning out my closet," and wondering if he'd taken things too far. He admits that he doesn't hate her, that he sees her as still beautiful because she's his mother, and acknowledges she did the best she could under terrible circumstances. It was a moment of mature reflection from a man who had finally begun to empathize with the very woman who caused him so much pain. Eminem even rhymes, "I'll always love you from afar 'cause you're my mama," in that track. A far cry from wishing her in hell. After Headlights, Marshall and Debbie's relationship thawed slightly. They did reconcile to a degree, exchanging communication after years of silence. However, it wasn't a fairy tale mother-son reunion. By most accounts, they remain somewhat estranged even today, though without the open hostility of earlier years. The bitterness and blame that Eminem carried for so long have largely been put to rest, replaced by a kind of distant respect and the understanding that holding on to hate only harms yourself. In Marshall's journey, making peace with his mother was a crucial step toward healing his own heart. But before that peace came, he had other battles to fight, including a war at home with the woman he thought was the love of his life. No figure has been more central to Eminem's personal mythology and infamous lyrics than Kimberly Ann Scott, his high school sweetheart and ex-wife, the Kim in songs like Kim and 97 Bonnie and Clyde. Their relationship was as passionate as it was destructive. Eminem met Kim when he was just a teenager. She was 13 and he was 15 when Kim first came to live with Marshall's family. She had run away from her own troubled home. They were just kids themselves, but they formed a bond that quickly turned romantic. By the time Marshall was in his early 20s, they were an on-and-off couple with a baby on the way. In 1995, their daughter, Haley Jade, was born, and Marshall was overjoyed. Becoming a father lit a fierce devotion in him. He and Kim tried to make a stable family for baby Haley, marrying in 1999 just as Eminem's career was exploding. But fame and personal demons would soon rip their marriage apart. To say Marshall and Kim's relationship was toxic is an understatement. They loved each other intensely, but that intensity often curdled into screaming matches, separations, and even violence. As Eminem's star ascended, so did his inner turmoil. He was suddenly dealing with global fame in his mid-20s, along with the pressure, temptation, and ego trip that can come with it. Kim later revealed that when Marshall went on his first major tour, his ego just went poof, like he was God. Groupies flung themselves at him. He indulged in typical young star misbehavior. Kim felt betrayed and insignificant. "I was told I should be grateful he still talks to me. I felt like a piece of crap," she said of that period. Meanwhile, Marshall was writing disturbingly vivid songs about their volatile love. On the infamous track Kim 2000, he didn't just vent. He fantasized in graphic detail about murdering Kim in a fit of rage and heartbreak. The song is essentially a horror movie in rhyme, with Marshall screaming himself hoarse, enacting a pretend killing of his wife. It's art as exorcism, horrifying and cathartic. And it remains one of Eminem's most controversial recordings. The real-life consequences of Marshall's anger and Kim's anguish came to a head one night in July 2000. Eminem was performing in his hometown Detroit as part of the Up in Smoke tour. During the show, he introduced a shocking stage prop, a blow-up doll made to resemble Kim, which he proceeded to beat and toss around on stage while performing the song Kim. The crowd of thousands cheered at this theatrical revenge, but one person in the arena was devastated. The real Kim, who was in the audience that night. To be publicly humiliated and symbolically killed in front of her hometown was too much. Kim later recounted how she saw everyone laughing and singing along as her husband acted out her mock murder. And she felt like the whole world was staring at her in judgment and glee. That night, Kim attempted suicide. She went home and slit her wrists, overwhelmed by despair. Paramedics were called to their home in Michigan. Kim survived the attempt, but the message was clear. The situation had become life or death. Marshall was shaken by Kim's suicide attempt, but their troubles didn't end there. The couple divorced in 2001 in the midst of this turmoil. Yet their bond was so strong, or perhaps dysfunctional, that they remarried in 2006, hoping to rebuild what had been broken. It only took 41 days for that second marriage to collapse. Marshall left, filing for divorce a second time, and Kim later admitted she'd been afraid even on their wedding day that history would repeat itself. It did. The cycle of hurt was just too strong. They had put each other through hell. Marshall's jealousy had even landed him in legal trouble. In one notorious 2000 incident, he assaulted a man he caught talking to, or possibly kissing, Kim, pistol whipping him in a parking lot, which led to assault and weapons charges against Eminem. Kim herself battled drug problems and legal issues in subsequent years, at one point getting a DUI and struggling with depression. Yet, through all this, something complicated remained between Marshall and Kim. Love. Twisted, angry love perhaps, but love. They shared the anchor of their daughter Haley, and Marshall also helped raise Kim's niece Elena, whom he legally adopted, as Elena's mother, Kim's twin sister Dawn, struggled with addiction. Later, he even adopted Whitney, a baby girl Kim had with another man during one of her separations from Marshall. It's telling that despite everything, Eminem willingly raised a child that resulted from Kim's infidelity, a sign that his capacity for care could overcome personal grudges when it came to innocent kids. Still, Marshall and Kim as a couple were finished for good by 2006. In interviews afterward, Kim offered a pop psychology insight into Marshall. "I believe he has issues with how to express his love," she said, adding that he never learned how to treat women because of how he was treated by his mother. In her eyes, the unresolved anger from his childhood bled into their adult relationship, dooming it. With time, and Marshall's hard-won sobriety, which we'll discuss shortly, the hostilities between Eminem and Kim cooled. By the late 2010s, they reached a point of amicable co-parenting. Marshall has even stated that he and Kim have a good rapport in raising Hailey, and that he wishes nothing but the best for her. The murderous lyrics stopped. In their place came songs like Going Through Changes, where Eminem in 2010 soberly rapped, "Hailey, this one is for you, Whitney and Elena too. I still love your mother, that'll never change." This single line reveals a world of growth. He will always love Kim in some form, as the mother of his children, even if he cannot be with her. The saga of Marshall and Kim is messy and tragic, a cocktail of young love, poverty, fame, drugs, and mutual pain. But it taught Marshall an important lesson. The people you love most can hurt you the deepest, and vice versa. It's a lesson he'd confront again as he spiraled into addiction and nearly lost everything. By the early 2000s, Marshall Mathers had transformed into Eminem, one of the biggest music stars on the planet. His albums were selling millions. His alter ego, Slim Shady, was a pop culture icon, and controversy swirled around him constantly. He was on top of the world. But privately, Marshall was struggling to hold himself together. The childhood traumas and the chaos in his family life didn't disappear with success. If anything, fame poured gasoline on those flames. Suddenly he was dealing with lawsuits from his mother, from his bully, from others, censorship campaigns, and the pressure to live up to his own hype. He often felt trapped by fame, with everyone wanting a piece of Slim Shady. In one darkly prophetic 2000 track, The Way I Am, he vented about the crushing expectations and how the sudden celebrity felt like an attack on his very sense of self. He rapped about having no privacy, about fans and critics pulling him in all directions. The stress was consuming him. Marshall had always been a private, introverted person in real life. Now privacy was a luxury he didn't have. Rumors started flying that Eminem had become too paranoid to leave his home. And indeed, after his 2005 Encore album, he virtually disappeared from the public eye for several years. The truth was, Marshall was in the grip of a growing addiction. He had long used prescription pills, Vicodin for pain, Ambien to sleep, Valium for anxiety, to take the edge off his stressful life. What began as casual or prescribed use snowballed into dependency. After the death of his best friend, Proof, in 2006, Proof was shot and killed in a bar fight in Detroit. Eminem's pill use escalated into a full-blown spiral. Proof's loss devastated Marshall. It was the final straw in a pile of griefs. He felt more alone than ever, and the drugs numbed the pain, until they nearly killed him. Marshall's addiction crept up to truly dangerous levels. At his worst, he later admitted he was taking up to 20 pills a day. Whatever he could get. Vicodin, Xanax, Valium, you name it. "I was just taking anything anybody was giving to me," he recalled of that hazy period. Tolerance and desperation drove him to absurd extremes. He has said that at one point he was swallowing 30 Vicodin pills in a day, a potentially lethal amount. He'd mix in other drugs like Ambien, which caused him serious memory loss episodes, and even methadone, a drug so powerful that one hospital doctor told him a single large dose he took was the equivalent of taking 4 bags of heroin. In 2007, Marshall Mathers finally hit rock bottom. That year, just before Christmas, he overdosed on a combination of pills, including methadone, and nearly died. He was rushed to the hospital unconscious. "In 2007, I overdosed on pills and went into the hospital," he later recounted. "I was close to 230 pounds. I'm not sure how I got so big, but I have ideas." The weight gain was another side effect. The opiate drugs had messed up his metabolism, and the coating on the Vicodin and Valium leaves a hole in your stomach. So to avoid a stomachache, I was constantly eating, and eating badly. Eminem explained of how he ballooned while he was getting high. In the hospital, doctors told him he had consumed enough methadone to kill him. If he had been found just 2 hours later, he likely would have died. Marshall had come terrifyingly close to leaving this world. A multi-platinum artist nearly reduced to another tragic headline. Waking up from that overdose was a turning point. Marshall saw two paths: continue on this course and almost certainly die, or fight his way back to life. It sounds straightforward, but recovery is never easy, especially under the glare of fame. Marshall went to rehab in 2005 before the overdose, but struggled there. He felt like Bugs Bunny in rehab, constantly recognized and hounded for autographs by fellow patients. "I couldn't concentrate on my problem," he said, describing how even in rehab, people wouldn't treat him normally. After the 2007 overdose, he chose a different route, an intensive private recovery program. And this time, he had a secret weapon in his corner, an unlikely friend who knew a lot about addiction. Elton John. Marshall reached out to the British rock legend who had battled his own cocaine and alcohol demons years earlier, and Elton agreed to mentor Eminem through sobriety. The two began weekly check-in calls, with Elton acting as Eminem's sponsor in a 12-step recovery sense. It was an odd pairing on the surface, the flamboyant older gay piano man and the brash young rapper who once used homophobic slurs. But it turned into a life-saving friendship. "I'm Eminem's AA sponsor," Elton John later revealed, sharing that whenever he calls, Marshall always answers with a joking, a sign of their comfort with each other. With Elton's guidance, plus professional counselors and a strong determination, Marshall began to claw out of the abyss of addiction. One of the biggest motivations in Marshall's recovery was fatherhood. By this time, his daughter Haley was entering her teens, and his two adopted girls, Elena and Whitney, were also growing up fast. Eminem says that his children became his anchor to reality, the reason to get clean and stay alive. "In the end, I credit my daughters with keeping me sober," he said, emphasizing that he wanted to be there for Haley, Elena, and Whitney above all else. He realized he needed to break the cycle for them, to not put them through what he went through with his own parents. So he fought. He flushed his pills, endured the agony of withdrawal, and found new outlets to cope. One outlet was exercise. He became almost compulsively dedicated to jogging and workouts, replacing one addiction with another, healthier one. "Unless I was blitzed out of my mind, I had trouble sleeping. So I started running," he told Men's Journal, explaining how he would run for miles to tire himself out each day. It's easy to understand how people replace addiction with exercise, one addiction for another, but one that's good for them, he reflected. The pounds came off, the clarity came back, and slowly Marshall felt human again. By April 2008, Eminem achieved what had recently seemed impossible. He was sober. He has now been in recovery for well over a decade, celebrating 10 years sober in 2018 with a proud Instagram post of his recovery coin. In the song Not Afraid, 2010, which became an anthem of overcoming, Eminem addressed his past and declared, "I've been through the ringer, but I can handle what life throws at me." It was triumphant, but also hard-won. The voice of someone who has staggered through fire and come out the other side, scarred but alive. Getting sober allowed Marshall to mend some broken relationships. He and Kim reached a far more civil understanding after the haze of drugs lifted, and he became deeply involved in his children's everyday lives, making up for lost time. He even reached out to his mother in a more compassionate way, as we saw with the headlights apology. Perhaps most importantly, Marshall finally learned to forgive himself for his failures as a husband, as a son, even as a father during those dark years when he wasn't fully present. In 2005's song When I'm Gone, written just before he got clean, you can hear him grappling with guilt over being an absent dad and a neglectful partner. Post-recovery, he worked to be better, to live up to the second chance he'd been given. Throughout all the chaos of his life, One thing remained a guiding light for Marshall: his children. Eminem has often said that being a father is his proudest accomplishment, more meaningful to him than all the awards. And it's not just talk. His actions bear it out. Remember, Marshall grew up without a dad present. He knew the ache of that emptiness. From the moment Haley was born, he was determined to be a different kind of father than his own. Instead of repeating his father's mistake, he decided to do better, one observer aptly noted. And he truly did. Despite his youthful wildness and career demands, Marshall was by many accounts a doting and devoted dad behind the scenes. While the world saw Slim Shady as this angry, unhinged character, those close to him saw Marshall at home changing diapers, making mac and cheese, and doting on his little girl. Eminem famously shielded Haley from the spotlight while she was growing up. Unlike many celebrity kids, Haley had a relatively normal childhood. School, activities, even going to public high school in Michigan, where she was on the honor roll. Marshall's lyrics are full of references to her, from sweet tracks like Haley's song, where he sings, in his own off-key way, about how she keeps him going, to Mockingbird, where he apologizes to Haley and Elena for the hardships they experienced during his bad years. In Mockingbird, he reassures little Haley that Daddy's here, and you ain't got nothing to worry about. A promise that he would give her the safety and love he never had as a kid. He even mentions Elena, calling her Lainey, in that song, highlighting that he saw his niece-turned-daughter as equally his responsibility. Marshall's commitment went beyond words. He legally adopted Elena in the early 2000s when it became clear her biological mother, Kim's sister, could not care for her due to a serious drug addiction. Elena had been living with Marshall and Kim from a young age. She'd live with us wherever we was at, Eminem said, explaining that he's been there for Elena ever since she was born. Later, when Kim had Whitney in 2002 and then fell into drug trouble herself, Marshall stepped up again. Though Whitney was not his blood daughter, he made the choice to adopt Whitney as well, raising her as his own child. At the time, Eminem had every reason to walk away. He and Kim were broken up, and Whitney's father was another man who was literally on the run and not in the picture. But Marshall's sense of responsibility and compassion wouldn't allow him to abandon an innocent child. He knew the pain of being an unwanted kid. He once said in an interview that when he looked at baby Whitney, he was in love with that girl, man. She's so sweet and funny, and he couldn't imagine not being in her life. In this way, Eminem built an unconventional but loving blended family of 3 girls: Haley, Elena, and Whitney, all while the world was calling him crazy or obscene in his music. It's a striking duality. The enraged young man cursing his mother and fantasizing about violence on records, versus the tender-hearted father braiding his little girl's hair and taking them to school. Marshall has acknowledged that fatherhood is like living a double life for him. On stage, he was Slim Shady, the provocateur. At home, he was just dad. And he had to switch between those roles constantly. Being a dad is definitely living a double life, he said. He talked about juggling the rap life and fatherhood, trying to set a good example for his kids, while performing as an artist known for pushing boundaries. Despite what people may think of me and what I say in my songs, I'm trying to teach them and make them learn from my mistakes, Marshall explained. That meant setting rules and boundaries for his children, even as he fiercely defended freedom of speech in his art. He has been open that he's not proud of everything his daughters might one day hear in his old lyrics, but he wants them to understand why he was the way he was, and to not repeat his errors. By most indications, Marshall succeeded in giving his girls a stable upbringing. Haley graduated high school as an honors student and later earned a college degree, emerging as a grounded young woman. She's nothing like me, and that's how I wanted it, Eminem has said with pride. Happy that Haley grew up without the anger and chaos that defined his own youth. As of today, all 3 of his daughters are adults finding their own paths, and Marshall remains a devoted, protective father who largely stays out of the limelight so they can live their lives. In caring for his children and breaking the cycle of parental dysfunction, Marshall found a form of redemption. He couldn't change what he went through as a child, but he could ensure that his kids knew they were loved, safe, and supported. In that sense, fatherhood healed something in him. It gave him the family he always longed for. His journey as a dad taught him about empathy and sacrifice, qualities that didn't come easy to a man who once described himself as a selfish poet. And it is through the eyes of his daughters that Marshall often measures his own legacy now. Having survived poverty, violence, addiction, and the roller coaster of global fame, Marshall Mathers stands as a complicated figure. On one hand, he's a superstar who achieved the kind of success most can only dream of. He sold over 150 million records, won endless awards, and his words have touched and shocked millions. On the other hand, he's a man who carries deep scars. In many ways, fame itself became another trauma for Eminem. He once confessed in an interview that nobody really understands the pressure he was under. "I'm under so much pressure. Pressure to always be good, to always be on point," he said about the height of his success. The same fame that brought him freedom from poverty also brought paranoia and isolation. During his drug years, it was rumored he rarely left his mansion, anxious about facing the outside world. He had become a self-described recluse by 2006, wary of even going to the store because of paparazzi or overzealous fans. He saw what celebrity did to people and often hated it. In one song he snarled, "I can't go nowhere, I'm a commodity," reflecting how he felt less like a person and more like a product at times. Yet ask Marshall now and he'll tell you he doesn't blame fame entirely. In a candid moment he checked himself, saying roughly, "Would I rather be cleaning dishes for $8 an hour like before, or dealing with this life now? What do I really have to complain about?" He recognizes that despite the mental toll, he'd choose this path again because it allowed him to achieve his dreams and provide for his family. "If I had never made it, I'd be 10 billion times worse off," he admitted, acknowledging that hip-hop saved him as much as it tortured him. This level of self-awareness is hard-earned. It shows a man who has gained perspective with age. He can see past the persona, past the noise, and appreciate what truly matters. Today, Eminem is in his early 50s. A father, an artist, a survivor. He still lives in Detroit, not in Hollywood or some mansion overseas. He still records music, albeit at a slower pace. And when he does drop an album, he often sounds reflective about his past. He rarely does interviews, keeping that promise to himself to guard his private life and his family. In fact, he decided long ago to stop rapping about his family drama in newer music, out of respect for his kids' privacy as they grew up. The angry young man who once thrived on airing every grievance in public learned that some things are better kept to yourself, and that healing sometimes requires silence and letting go, not another diss track. What can we learn from Marshall's journey? If there's one theme running through the life of Eminem, it's resilience. Over and over he was knocked down by cruel peers, by poverty, by family strife, by his own inner demons. And time after time, he got back up, not without scars and not always gracefully, but he rose. He turned pain into art with a ferocity that few have ever matched, spitting out his trauma in machine gun verses that were at once horrifying and transfixing. He used his alter ego, Slim Shady, to say the unsayable, to give himself an outlet for the darkest emotions, anger, nihilism, even self-loathing, that might have otherwise consumed him. In doing so, he connected with millions of listeners who, though they might not share his specific story, felt that raw catharsis and related to the passion behind it. Marshall's story is also a cautionary tale about how unchecked pain can wreak havoc. His inability to process his hurt in healthy ways early on led him down some destructive roads, hurting those he loved, wallowing in hatred, nearly losing himself to addiction. But the beauty of his arc is that he did eventually confront those issues. He got sober. He made amends where he could. He expressed remorse for the times he went too far, to his mother, to his fans for his problematic lyrics, even to the LGBTQ community, for past slurs. He performed with Elton John at the Grammys in 2001 as a symbolic gesture of unity. Marshall grew up. It's the kind of growth that can only come from looking in the mirror one day and not liking the person you see, and deciding to change, not for image, not for sales, but for your own soul and for those who need you. In the end, the lasting effects of Eminem's fame and fortune didn't make Marshall Mathers superhuman. If anything, they highlighted his fragility. He's spoken about still dealing with anxiety and the lingering shadows of depression, even years into sobriety. Proof that mental health is a continuous journey, not a destination. But rather than hide it, he channels it into his music. In a recent interview, Eminem said, "One of the great things about rap is that you can put so much of your life in it. It's therapeutic, and that's how it's always been for me." By confronting his pain head-on through lyrics, he found a way not just to cope, but to transform that pain into something powerful, something that can even inspire others to overcome their own struggles. Marshall Mathers' life teaches us that pain and purpose can go hand in hand. He once wrote, "In my shoes, just to see what it's like to be me," inviting people to understand his perspective. Walking in his shoes, we see a path littered with obstacles that would make many people give up. But we also see an extraordinary will to not give up. A belief, perhaps, that if he could just get that next verse out, if he could just push a little further, he'd find the light at the end of the tunnel. And he did find it. Not a perfect life, not a storybook ending, but a hard-won peace with himself. So what can we take from Marshall's journey of resilience and pain? Maybe it's this: no matter where you start in life, no matter how deep the wounds go, you can write a new ending to your story. It won't be easy. It might take everything you have. You might have to face down your worst fears and own up to your own failings. You might have to forgive people who never said sorry, and forgive yourself for mistakes you swore you'd never make. But as Eminem's story shows, it can be done. A bullied kid can become a world-famous artist. A drug addict on the brink of death can climb back to sobriety. A fatherless boy can become a loving dad. The road is long, and the scars will always be there. Marshall still carries his scars, right alongside his Grammys. But you can keep moving forward. Marshall Mathers turned his pain into poetry and his rage into music. In doing so, he gave voice to his own demons and inadvertently helped millions of others feel a little less alone in theirs. "I'm not afraid to take a stand," he declared in one of his comeback songs, and by taking a stand, he found redemption. His life reminds us that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise after you've fallen. Few have fallen as hard as Marshall, and few have risen as defiantly. In the final tally, the boy from Detroit, who once had nothing, managed to give the world something invaluable: the honest truth that even our most broken moments can fuel our greatest comebacks. Thank you all for watching. Eminem's journey shows that behind every public persona is a private battle. It challenges us to look at others and ourselves with a bit more understanding. After all, as Marshall Mathers demonstrated, sometimes the people with the toughest exteriors are the ones who've endured the most pain on the inside. And with resilience, reflection, and heart, they find a way not just to survive, but to inspire. Until next time, stay wise, stay strong, and remember, the real heroes are those who battle their demons and come out the other side. Our struggles do not define us. How we respond to them does. In the words of Eminem's own mentor, Elton John, "You're still standing. Marshall Mathers is still standing. And so can you."